Thank the League of Women Voters and the NAACP for giving me this opportunity. And thanks for everybody in the audience who came out here tonight to learn more about each one of us. Thank you, Steve, for your public service and your military service. I'm Jack Bailey. I'm a retired natural resource police officer. I retired after 30 years. My family, many of you are familiar with, has been here for several generations. I come from a long line of public servants. My father, he was a state's attorney, public defender, just a county attorney in Leonardtown. My mom, she was a school teacher. My great uncle, Senator Paul Bailey, he was a Republican senator for 16 years when being a Republican in St. Mary's County wasn't a very popular thing. I've continued this tradition of living in St. Mary's County. I live with my wife Karen and our two children, Helen and Teo. We're actively involved in this community, in the schools, church, Little League, travel ball, and various other community volunteer organizations. When I started my career, I was a game warden in both St. Mary's and Calvert counties. Then I started to work statewide. I started working with the U.S. Department of Justice and the Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm now a nationally recognized expert. I completed both my undergraduate and graduate work at Johns Hopkins. Got my master's in management. As far as legislative experience, during the Ehrlich administration, I was legislative liaison for the Natural Resource Police. During this time, I drafted bills, completed bill reports, worked with Department of Legislative Service personnel, lobbied members of the General Assembly, and testified on behalf of the administration. I also testified as the FOP president. I was the FOP president for 4 years. We did a lot of work in the legislature. These experiences will help me serve and do well as your next state senator. In addition to our Change Maryland agenda of lowering taxes and creating more opportunities for our small businesses, my agenda and my platform is education, public safety, school safety, the environment, and healthcare. I want to be available, approachable, and committed to each one of you. I want an office and be your full-time senator. I'm not going to have another job. I'm retired. This is my job, representing each and every one of you full-time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waugh.
Good evening. Does this one work? Yep. Good evening. This one works, right?
Press the bottom. Press the bottom. Look for the green light.
There we go. There. All right. Hey. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is a packed room. This is the most people I've ever seen out here for one of these things. And thanks to the League of Women Voters and NAACP for sponsoring us here tonight. And I want everyone to know the first thing I told Jack is don't worry, you won't die. These things are fun and fast and furious, but it'll be a great experience. So it's been my great honor and privilege to serve as your state senator for the last 4 years. And I've tried to focus on the things that you find most important and that you're most worried about in your daily life. And years ago, I ran on saying, hey, jobs are the issue, taxes are the problem, spending is the cause. And then the top priorities of government need to be public safety, transportation, and education. And I think I've stuck to that. In fact, the first day in office, I walked in, I laid down a strategy with the staff, and I said, this is what we're doing. If we're doing something not on that list, stop doing it. If it needs to be on the list, let's talk about it. But I think we've kept a laser focus on your priorities, and I believe that we've worked very hard to do that. In this last year, I've been very privileged to be in a position to make a real serious difference on a couple of different issues. And specifically on veterans, did an enormous amount of work on that. I'm very, very proud of, and kind of turned into the Tom Sawyer of senators. I got everybody else in the legislature doing the work for me now, which is great. And then on school safety. When things happened in Parkland and when things really, really got important, we stepped out and we did something. And I will tell you, that was the most proud moment of my term in the last 4 years, with making that happen for you guys. Now, I think most folks know that I'm a Marine. It means that I'm a little bit different. I have some rough edges. I'm sorry, that's just who I am. I try really hard, and I got to tell you, it's been a real personal journey for me to bite my tongue and wait and count a few seconds. And Matt and Deb and Jerry in the back have been the best delegates to work with, and they all know what a job it is for me to hold it all in and keep it going. But I've tried very hard, and the simple fact is that, you know, I'm one of those guys that just have a low tolerance for BS. I'm going to think for myself, and I'm going to speak my mind. And it's because I believe that I work for you. I don't work for anybody else. And I got elected to this office. I asked for this job so that I could work for you guys. So I believe that I have been that bulldog, and I'm hoping to be that bulldog again for you for the next 4 years. Thanks very much.
Senator Waugh, the first question will be for you. Why don't you have an office in Calvert or St. Mary's County? What can you promise you will do to keep in better touch with the public?
Okay, when we first got elected, in fact, Matt and Deb and Tony and I all sat down and we looked at going to get a brick and mortar office. And what we figured out really rapidly is that it was a giant waste of taxpayer funding to just hang a shingle. Because the truth of the matter is that today's 21st century, and I just gave my cell phone to my wife Myra to hold, is that those cell phones that we have now, and the one that's being used to live stream this thing, are in fact a mobile office. This is what allows everyone in the 21st century to get out and about. And in fact, I have 6 different email accounts that go to that thing, including Facebook Messenger. So there's about a dozen different ways to get in contact with me really rapidly. And I think almost everybody in the county has got my email now. So I'm trying to be the most accessible guy that can be had. We do a really good job, I think, of rapping back to people as soon as we get a call. Then we scramble our district secretary out to talk to folks in person, collect some information, and then start acting on constituent issues. So I don't believe that wasting the taxpayer dollar on a brick and mortar office to make somebody feel good to have a shingle is worth it. I would rather hire people to get things done for you.
Mr. Bailey, how experienced are you in the operations of the Maryland General Assembly? Can we count on you to hit the ground running?
I just gave in my opening the fact that I worked there as the legislative liaison. I also worked there as the FOP representative. So I feel very experienced. Obviously, I don't have the 4 years that my opponent has for being there, but 4 years ago, he didn't have it either. And I don't know that he had what I had at that point. I'd like to correct the record just for a minute about this office in this 21st century. That's not exactly true, what was just said. Fact is, that money comes from the Senate to each senator. That money is then returned. In his case, it's returned to Mike Miller. The money doesn't come back to any of us. It's used in other areas around the state, in other districts, to support people that aren't managing their own budget. Not having a brick and mortar office doesn't do anything but take away from us and our constituents.
The next question will be for both candidates, and we'll start with Mr. Bailey. If I have solutions to better protect children from school shootings, how will you use the information I can provide to you when you are a state senator?
School shootings and school safety are our #1 priority, and we need to absolutely look at that. I just finished my master's at Johns Hopkins. #1 forum they're running there, how to protect school safety, and they're doing it. They're looking at all different types of people as the experts. They're looking at the local school level. They're looking from children all the way to the administrators, to the teachers, to the experts. Every single person involved in the process. And that's the way I think that we move forward. We move forward as a community, together. Our community leaders are elected and they're established. When it comes to school safety, we should be working with them. We should be working with our sheriff's department, our police, the people who are recognized as the experts. And as we work as a community, we will be able to solve these problems together. Not somebody that knows all the answers and says, this is how you're going to do it. We should do it together.
Senator Waugh.
Okay, actually I got to go back and correct something that Jack just said. The way the budget, just to clarify this thing, the way the budget works, and by the way, I'm very flattered to have Chris Shank down from the governor's office here to conduct the coordinated attack. The way the Senate budget works is that, and it's a little bit different from the delegates, is that we're given a budget of about $40,000, and that's to be used for salary for personnel in your office and some other sundry things, and including an office. So if a senator pays for a brick and mortar office, which might cost you $12,000 a year or more, then that's going to come out of your office. We wouldn't have the money to pay for staff to come and help you with things. So then back onto the question of school safety, you know, we got a lot done this year. That was a really big issue. It was a really big job, and I'm sorry I don't have more time to talk about that.
Senator Waugh, 2 years ago you required St. Mary's County Commissioners to cut taxes to gain borrowing authority to build Leonardtown Library and Senior Center. This year, Calvert County gained your support for a $41 million borrowing authority for new governmental center without a tax cut. Why are St. Mary's citizens held to a different standard than Calvert County citizens?
So the delegations are different. And in fact, when we were doing the St. Mary's County delegation bills 2 years ago, we'd gone through the Code Home thing, and there was a big question about how much debt was the appropriate debt level for the county. So part of the debt package that we ended up putting together and we agreed on as a team was, this thing just keeps coming in and out. Part of that was we wanted to get a property tax cut for the citizens of St. Mary's County in order to enable the $26 million that the commissioners had arrived at. In the end, and I'm sorry that Commissioner Randy Guy isn't here with us tonight, in the end I ended up negotiating with Commissioner Guy to get rid of that particular section of the bill in exchange for an offer from him that they would pick a tax and reduce it. So in fact, in that case, Commissioner Guy is the one who personally agreed to the constant yield in order to get the bond authority for St. Mary's County.
Mr. Bailey, there's been a lot of discussion on you following Governor Hogan's agenda. Where do you disagree with him?
That's a great question. The issue is the governor has a completely different constituent base than what we have here in St. Mary's County and Calvert County. St. Mary's and Calvert County, we're conservative Republicans. The governor does not have that across the state. It's different for him. So when we look at things, and I've actually had this exact discussion with him sitting in his office. The fact is, I'm going to vote for you, for our citizens. I'm going to go along with you and your vote. I'm not going to vote to make our schools, our colleges less safe like my opponent did after he told the governor how he was going to vote. And I'd like to respond to that if I can. So, I'm not sure what Jack's answer was there. I'm not sure if he's saying that he will oppose the governor or if he's going to fully support the governor. So you might want to squeeze that out of him a little bit later. So the question was SB 543, and the entire piece of legislation was about moving the question of criminal background on a student application later in the application, away from the initial application into later in the process. So initially, basically everybody was opposed to it. Then the colleges and the universities came to us and they asked for an amendment to the bill, which we gave them. And when we gave that to them, they removed all of their opposition. In fact, privately they told us that they liked it because what it was going to allow them to do is look at criminal background only of 1,000 kids instead of 10,000 kids. It was going to make their life easier and actually allow them to make the campus more safe. And very explicitly in the bill, it says, institutes of higher education may inquire into a student's criminal background for purposes of admission and campus residency.
Mr. Bailey, how would you have voted on the free community college bill that Governor Hogan signed?
As being a new senator, I agree with the fact that with the community colleges that we have different bases where when you only make a certain amount of money and you have a basis that is under the threshold, we should all have a good education and you get to go there. I disagree with the fact that it should be open to people that are not U.S. citizens.
Senator Waugh, why did you vote against the bill?
So I voted against the bill explicitly because it was specifically, and I mean very specifically targeted, to provide a free college education to illegal immigrants. Now the bill as it was constructed basically says, hey, we're going to create a fund, we're going to put $10 million out there, we're going to give it away in grants, and we're going to set it up so that it goes to kids from families of certain incomes down below a particular level. So not so bad yet. But then it also says that in order to apply for the grant, and it's a first come, first served thing, in order to apply for the grant, you have to have graduated from a Maryland high school. So that's 1 day. In previous bills, several years ago, when they were doing in-state tuition for illegal immigrants, they said you got to be here 3 years, you have to pay taxes, rah, rah, rah. Well, this time they said, no, you just have to have graduated from high school, so for 1 day. We tried to amend that out in committee, because the bill came through my committee. We tried to get rid of it in committee and fix it, they refused. That's when we knew it was very explicitly for the singular purpose of free education for illegals. We tried to amend it again on the floor, and they would not.
Senator Waugh, what were your major legislative accomplishments over your 4-year term? Please be specific.
Well, the easiest one is the school safety bill. I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that was one that I was so just. In fact, I said earlier today, I got so excited when it passed, I actually forgot to vote. That, I think, is probably the most substantial thing that we have been able to get done in the last 4 years. It will make a serious difference in the lives of every student and every parent in this state, because we are working to make your schools more secure. It's not enough, it's not fast enough, but it was a huge step in the right direction. And that started on my desk. And that started, 1 day when I finally said, hey, if not me, who? And if not now, when? So I called up my good friend John Astle and I said, hey John, I want to take a shot at this, are you with me? John's another Marine, he said, yes, I'm in. We built a bipartisan coalition, and in 5 days, I had the minority leader, the majority leader, and the Senate president all on board with a package of bills with about 12 or 15 different components of things that we were going to attack it. And getting that done, that was a massive accomplishment.
Mr. Bailey?
Can I respond to that?
Okay.
So here's what I would say. That was a step in the right direction, but that was a small step. It created, first off, as those of you that are familiar with our Sheriff's Department and our Board of County Commissioners and our Board of Education, we do 75% of what that bill says already, right? We already do it. And the part that was funded, it's an unfunded mandate that will cause financial problems for us, right? If you're going to legislate something, you need to put the money there for it. The governor had the same initiative, and the money was there for it. It would have been much better served to have put the money and supported the governor's bill.
Mr. Bailey, Governor Larry Hogan has been outspoken in his opposition to President Trump, from announcing that he did not vote for Trump in 2016 to offering support to Maryland's Attorney General and suing the Trump administration for its travel ban policy. What is your opinion of President Trump? Do you share Hogan's opinion of him, and do you share his opposition to the travel ban?
Remember what I said about being able to vote and represent your constituents? From the first meeting that I've had with people, I understand conservative Republicans, and in St. Mary's County, we like Donald Trump. I support him, and I do like Donald Trump.
This is for both candidates, and we'll start with Senator Waugh. What is your belief about the enactment of safe, sane, and sensible laws to curb gun violence?
So here's the real challenge, and this actually came up during the whole school safety debate, is that we looked at things from the perspective of, there's a magic moment when a gun arrives in a parking lot, but prior to that, there's a magic moment before a gun gets purchased. And so you can do things to control all the legal and registered weapons to the left side of that point, but it'll do nothing to affect all of the illegal and unregistered weapons. And in fact, You know, this has always been a big question about how often are illegal weapons used in crime, and I had a bill put in to try to figure that out. But I withdrew it because about an hour before I showed up, we had the police commissioner from Baltimore, before he was indicted. We had the police commissioner from Baltimore come in, and he was asked point blank about the 343 murders in Baltimore. How many of those were done with a legal and registered weapon? His answer was none. Not a single one. So we can pile on all the gun control we want, things like a bump stock ban and this red flag bill, and it will not affect all of the gun violence in the state.
Mr. Bailey?
The fact of the matter is, Senate Bill 907 was sponsored only by my opponent. And that bill would have taken away, it would have created a public database that any person that used a firearm in self-defense would have been listed. And by the way, in St. Mary's County, any of you that are familiar, if you ever target practiced or discharged a firearm on any person's property other than your own, and you didn't have written permission, you'd be a misdemeanor. You'd committed a misdemeanor, and it's a $1,000 fine. That is the criminal law. So the fact is, anybody that ever did that would be a criminal and be in that database. And there's only one person in the whole legislature that put that in. That was my opponent.
Okay, I need a response. You can tell he spent a lot of time pointing at me. So, what I was trying to do, like I said, with SB 907 is the question of how much gun violence, and this is the thing, how many people in here are gun owners? You know, a lot. Okay. And as Sheriff Cameron was once asked, do you own a gun? He was like, no. I mean, I own a bunch of them. Why would you only own one? So, with 907, what we were trying to get at is the question of how much gun violence is actually committed with legal and registered weapons. And I knew what the answer was, but weirdly, and this is the thing that I know everyone here is going to have a hard time believing, is that that information is not tracked. It's not tracked by the FBI, it's not tracked by the ATF, it's not tracked by the state police, it's not tracked by anybody. So what we were trying to get to is the question of how much of this violence is actually being committed by legal registered weapons, so that I could make the case compellingly, which I did, that hey, gun control is not going to solve the problems of Baltimore.
Mr. Bailey, what will you be doing to continue Maryland Veterans Agenda for our military retirees and veterans?
Thank you. Great question. And shortly after becoming a candidate, I was approached by several veterans that had not had their cases heard, so by the local constituents. So I went directly to Annapolis. I met with the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, George Owens. I have 2 events planned with him in the next week because I feel veterans, as I thank my opponent for being a veteran, veterans are how we live here today, and we need to represent them. We go up and walk on the trail and visit with the veterans right across from my house. I want to work for them and with them. Thank you.
Senator Waugh, earlier this year we lost funding for the third wing of the Higher Ed Center. What is the plan to recover that funding?
Yeah, so that was a difficult moment. So what happened was a DLS analyst put in some information into the budget that was incorrect, and it was about the sizing of the facility and the enrollment. And it was all focused on declining enrollment. Well, if declining enrollment was a problem, we wouldn't put up a building in any college in the state. All of our physical universities are having a hard time. Anyway, Mike Miller ended up killing the money and stopped the merger. So we launched into a campaign with the delegates and I, along with the Board of Governors, and we got email going, we got phone calls going. In fact, so much so that the Speaker's office actually came to me and said, stop it, we get it. And it got put back inside of the House. So we got that part of it done. Then when we came back into the Senate, Miller killed it again. So I ended up spending the last 2 weeks negotiating a deal that revived the merger, put College Park in charge, and, oh, by the way, we'll get it reinserted into the budget after it's being appropriately sized and studied for enrollment, and then Governor Hogan has promised to fund it.
There's actually two options, two things with these bills. One, the first one was the merger. Merger bill should have been done prior to this year, right? It should have been done before, just like the appointment to the Board of Governors. It shouldn't have waited, right?
Fact is, when it came up this year,
Senator, I have
your emails here, where you simply ignored Joe
Anderson, and you ignored the county commissioners, and you
just let it go.
Oh.
Joe, you
sent
sent
an email around.
saying that this is a priority, don't worry about it. The analyst is not the decision maker. DLS makes all sort of recommendations, we just ignore them.
Joe Anderson.
He says, I beg to differ with Senator Waugh, pleading with you.
To get involved.
2 days later, got
Killed.
killed.
2
days
days
after that, you respond. Joe, you were obviously right to be concerned
when you were.
Fact of the matter is, this needed to be a
Our
higher
priority for us, for our constituents.
Okay, I'd like to respond. So, again, nothing, never let the truth stand in the way of a good story, right? So the fact is that as soon as the funding was removed from the Capitol, or actually as soon as the DLS analyst put out his information, I immediately had a meeting with the Vice Chancellor of the University System of Maryland. He and I personally conferred, and we figured out exactly what the strategy was, and we started executing it immediately. Now, the unfortunate thing is that it didn't work. So that happens. And sometimes budget line items get killed. And in fact, I personally was engaging with the chairman of the Capital Subcommittee, chairman of the Budget Committee, and the chairman of the committee over in the House. Now, I was doing it constantly. It got to be a little bit of a joke between Senator DeGrange and I. I kept threatening to cut his brakes. So there was daily engagement on this. We were constantly working it. It never lacked for attention. And in fact, I think the delegates would agree we're on top of this from day one.
Okay, we're going to go on to the next question. Yeah, we're going to go on to the next question. Mr. Bailey, what is your position on aquaculture and its effect on property owners' riparian rights?
Thank you, great question. I'm sure we're talking about the column oysters that are showing up in front of people's houses out in the river, and it's causing a great bit of controversy. Used to be, property owner controlled the riparian rights in front of their property as far as what could be out there. And used to be able to lease, the property owners leased all the oyster bottom out in front of their houses, and they controlled it. State came in a couple years ago and said, wait a minute, we're going to take away your riparian rights. So now these oyster farms are coming right in front of people's houses, right? And but they're still paying high property tax for the smell and the vision that is obstructed in their ability to get to deep water. The state is acting like a bully on this one, and as far as our county and our constituents are concerned, we're going to have to address it.
Senator Waugh.
All right, so if we want to clean up the bay, there's basically two things that we need to do. So first and foremost is that we got to fix the Conowingo Dam, because 80% of all the pollutants and all of the sediment that's in the bay comes over that dam. And actually, Governor Hogan's office has really led the way on this thing, and I believe that we have a test dredge going now. We're going to figure out, or have a pretty good idea of what it's going to take to fix that. The second thing we got to do is that we have got to unleash aquaculture. Virginia has done this. They have oysters growing like you read about, and it is clearing up the bay, and it is clearing up their tributaries, and Maryland needs to get on board this and to make this happen. But at the same time that we do that, we have to protect everyone's individual land rights. Now, everyone knows that, hey, wherever my property is, I got land rights there. But your land rights don't really extend beyond your boundaries. Now, there's some zoning considerations, right? You don't want someone building the Empire State Building next to your house. So there are some limitations to it. And then as we look out into the water, you have some rights that extend a little bit, but not very far.
Next question, Senator Waugh. Many employers in St. Mary's County have significant challenges in hiring a younger, skilled workforce. What will you do, or do you think should be done, to support these employers?
My son Philip is looking for a job right now. So we've added to the workforce. So here's the thing. Jobs are the most critical thing that the most critical issue and metric that we've got out there. We've grown 100,000 jobs over the course of the last few years, but we need to do more. So what I want to do is I want to pull together essentially a strategy for both at the local level and at the state level that's going to address job growth, specifically for startups, micros, and small businesses, so that we can help them with the three major challenges of access to capital, access to markets, and then regulatory relief. We've done some of this already. We did it with Guinness. We had to make a big change to the alcohol laws so that Guinness can build a big brewery up around Baltimore. And we're going to become a hub of the brewing industry. What we're working on now, I'm real excited about this one, is a Maryland malting facility. So,
Mr. Bailey?
There's some things here in St. Mary's County that we need to really concentrate on when it comes to job growth. One is tech jobs, vocational jobs, and the that third higher building. They all three would help in our economic status and our young people, right? Our vocational jobs we are leaving out, and they would be a great thing for us to spend more time and more emphasis on. When it comes to the third building, right? That's an opportunity lost. And with the merger, when it came back in, by the way, it was slated to go in effect this July. Now, even though it's back in, it came back in for next March of 2019. So it's 9 months delayed. And there's no guarantee that the governor will have the money to fund the budget for the third building next year. He wants to, but there's no guarantee.
Actually, I'd like to respond to that just briefly.
We're going to go to the...
No, all right.
Okay.
Senator, sit down.
Mr. Bailey, would you support metal detectors in schools?
The whole issue of school safety and metal detectors is pretty easy. It's between the Sheriff's Department, the Board of Ed, and the Superintendent's Office, and the County Commissioners, because that is who controls the budget. They also control the safety of our schools, right? It would be great to say, hey, we want a metal detector at every school. And obviously, as a parent, I would love to have it. That's not reality because we don't have that money. There is not a money tree or a fairy duster that can just give us that money, right? That's why we work locally. That's why our Sheriff's Department is so far advanced over many of the other areas of the state, right? It's because we've got a good sheriff and they work together. And that's what we need to do, is utilize them in making these decisions.
You want me to answer that one?
No, I have a different question for you. Our current leaders must show that they are current on local needs and concerns. I'm interested to understand your outreach and meetings with our local leaders. This can only assist you in drafting or fighting for legislation in our area. How many times have you personally, not through your staff, met with our county commissioners, sheriff, superintendent, or other local leaders?
So, I don't know, a lot. I'd have to go back through my calendar and try to figure that out. I see them around in a million different places and a million different events, like there's a few of them here tonight. And we talk pretty much every time that we see each other. So, I don't know. I know we have a number of interactions, and we try to work with them as best we can. But you know, some of those, it's certainly on every one of the local bills. And we had the annual meeting with all the commissioners, and we go through them. Like last year, they presented, I forget exactly how many it was. It was like 20 bills, and I think we got them all done. So this last term, so in the last 4 years, this has actually been the most successful delegation in the state. We got 33 out of 36 bills, which is truly extraordinary. I mean, we're like the friggin' deer hunters up there on local legislation. And then when you look at the other statewide legislation, there's a lot of times that something that, you know, you might see it one way here in St. Mary's, but you got to address it a little bit differently because there's 24 jurisdictions.
Okay, this is going to be a question for both of the candidates. We're going to start with Senator Waugh. Can you name 1 to 2 initiatives you would support to create a stronger farm industry in Maryland? Yeah,
actually, I was starting to talk about the Maryland malting facility. So we've we've done a lot. I've actually really been honored to work very closely with the Farm Bureau locally on a number of issues, principally on deer management things. We're starting to work on some stormwater management issues. There are some things that are peculiar to farms that we need to address on that. But the Maryland malting facility is actually one of the exciting ones. So, you know, craft beer is really taken off. All of that craft beer needs malt, and most of that malt is stuff like barley that our farmers grow as cover crops during the winter. So if you're a craft brewer and you need to buy malt, here's the bad news. You got to buy your malt from like Saskatchewan. So what we're trying to do is to set up a malting facility here that will actually consume all of our farmers' cover crops during the winter. We're going to turn those into cash crops, and we're going to become essentially the craft brewing hub for the Eastern Seaboard. Pretty much everyone who's making beer east of the Mississippi is going to come to Maryland and buy their malt.
Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. The fact that I have grown up on a farm, and all my uncles have farms, and my granddad had a farm, I feel that the fact is the farming industry in Maryland is changing. And it's changing every day, right? We don't have the traditional small tobacco farmer that we used to. That really was a big economic value for us. Now we have big truck farmings, and the other thing that's really taken place in Southern Maryland is our produce farming. Anybody that goes down to the Loveville auction and stands around and sees how many Amish, Mennonites, and the English farmers are there on a daily basis, and they sell their produce to up and down the East Coast, and it goes out and it's shipped, is a big issue. And if we could help them, I think locally that's a big issue for us.
Mr. Bailey, what would be your first priority or bill submitted if you're elected?
Great question.
My first bill submitted would deal with school safety. And the reason is, I think that we need to tighten up and take that small step
And move it
forward.
And I
I think we need to do that by engaging our children, and then actually this time engage the experts, the parents, engage the superintendents of school and the school boards, and engage the sheriffs. The people that are going to be responsible for this should be in the room when we make these decisions. We shouldn't utilize small group think methodology that causes problems down the road when we know better than the people right here on the ground that are dealing with it on a daily basis. And I would be proud to have that as my first initiative.
And this will be the last question, and it's for Senator Waugh. As a small business owner, I am very concerned about the way you acted and the quotes you gave in the paper when you walked out of the St. Mary's Chamber of Commerce meeting. Why would you treat the business owners in our county that way? Defend your action.
So I got to say, you know, this is back to the whole Marine thing. I was incredibly frustrated by Delegate Fisher's actions, because Delegate Fisher abused his office. He abused his position as the delegation chair for the House delegation, because he knew that the county delegation as a whole actually supported the county's bond request. So he decided on his own to unilaterally reduce that request by himself, $40 million. So I was kind of shocked when that happened. And then when we figured it out, we ended up having to fix it, and Delegate Clark took the lead, and we got the bill amended, and then it moved forward the way that it needed to be. So I got to tell you, I have never seen anyone abuse their office and try to perpetuate a fraud by lying to people about how it came about. And that disturbed me so much. I knew I was going to blow up in a public setting, and that was unacceptable, so I had to remove myself from it, because you guys didn't want to see Colonel Waugh come out of the Chamber of Commerce.
We're going to go ahead and do the closing statements from the candidates. Senator Waugh, we'll go ahead and have you go.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming here tonight. I love the questions. The questions were terrific. Really appreciate the engagement here. There's an extraordinary number of people. Jack, I told you, you weren't going to die. You survived. Neither of us had. Look, people always ask, how you doing? It's like, I'm not dead and I'm unindicted. You know? So that's above average for senators. So I've got to set the bar low, you know? Anyway, so I was really excited to be here tonight, and I hope what you get out of this is that, you know, I'm really passionate, okay? I am really passionate. And it can be to a fault. I'm a Marine. I'm sorry. There's no getting rid of it. I am who I am. I'm trying hard. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm really hoping that I can earn your support and gain your vote when it comes back, because I want to be the bulldog who's working for you for the next 4 years. Now, as we're looking down here and we're wondering, you know, why is all of this? So, well, the simple answer is him. And the answer is that Mr. Shank is down here for one reason and one reason only. And that's because he wants a lapdog who's going to work for him. Not because he wants to see a change in policy. That bothers me. I'm here to work for you. I'm not here to work for anybody else. I'm not here, you know, I don't work for the governor. I work for you guys. I'm going to be supporting you. I've proven I'm going to take the hard votes. I'll stand up, I will stand on principle, and I will represent you every day of the week. Every day of the week. So I hope I can earn that support, and we'll see you later. Thanks very much.
Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. Just to clarify, he was the only Republican to step away from the governor and vote to make our schools less safe.
In the closing
statement,
I'd like to represent you as your
state
state
senator, and I want to bring this race home.
And I want to bring it home because I'm proud to be from Southern
Maryland and represent St. Mary's and Calvert County. Whether you're a waterman, whether you're a farmer, whether you came here for the quality of life and you moved from PG County, you came here in the military, or you came here during one of the BRACs. That's what makes St. Mary's and Calvert County and Southern Maryland so valuable to me. And I want to represent you. And I want to represent you on a full-time basis. I don't want to have a part-time senator who doesn't even live in St. Mary's County. I want to represent each and every one of you. The office should be here. And the office needs to be brick and mortar, and I give you my word that as soon as I'm elected, we will have a brick and mortar office the same way we had since 1994. We will have one, and I will be accessible, approachable, available, and committed to each one of you. Thank you very much for your time tonight. And you know what? We're going to bring this home. Thank you.
We did have some questions that we weren't able to get to tonight, and I will email both candidates the questions so they can answer them in their own time.
And where
We're
were the
going
responses?
to resume at 7:15 with the sheriff's candidate.